And welcome into the Hustle Show podcast for this latest edition of the Hustle Short. I'm Mark Zinno, joined by Adam Trigger, and we are going to break down some Week 2 NFL, a game apiece. We'll get into some survivor picks as well. But we have to start with the biggest news coming out of Week 1, and that is the loss of Aaron Rodgers. His torn Achilles ends his season, and the New York Jets suddenly have to find themselves either a new quarterback or going back to the well with Zach Wilson. But nonetheless, Trey, great to be with you. The markets all about the Jets have moved all over the place in the last 24 hours. Kind of what's your perception on what has happened to the betting markets, and what is your reaction to what we're seeing?
So my reaction to what I'm seeing is clear sort of overreaction to Rodgers being out. I mean, listen, that was going to happen regardless, right? Like, and there's no way I'm going to sit here and tell you that Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers are not that many points apart or a few points apart. There's no question about that. But I do think, like, I'm just going to look at the screen right now and seeing some Cowboys, up to -9.5. I haven't jumped in with the Jets yet, mostly because I'm just not sure if I love the spot for the Jets. Of course, they kind of come off of like the crazy overtime win on Monday night, and now they have to go on the road and play the Cowboys. I don't know if that's the spot I want to sort of back them in, but I will be looking for spots to back the Jets, at least in the short term, because I just am more of a believer in this team. I think the team is really good. I thought the defense was fantastic. I thought Breece Hall looked awesome. They have some weapons. Garrett Wilson made a great catch to tie that game up. The team is good. Now, Zach Wilson might not take them to the next level as a Super Bowl contender, but can Zach Wilson, a guy that was a first-round, second overall pick a couple of years ago, maybe mature a little bit and be like the quarterback that he was sort of supposed to be? I mean, Mark, I'll throw it back to you. Do you think it's possible that he got rushed in to being a starter, young kid, immature, didn't really, wasn't playing well and maybe didn't know how to handle not playing well? Of course, had the thing with the media last year where he threw his teammates under the bus. I see a lot of immaturity with Zach Wilson. And you know what can humble someone real quick, especially a young guy that sort of had everything go his way his whole life, would be something not going his way, like the end of last season, getting benched for Chris Streveler, right, at one point, a former CFL quarterback. Then having to really battle for his spot on the team this offseason. I mean, he was not guaranteed to even be the number 2 quarterback or the backup quarterback. And he had to go and like win that spot. So now that he's getting a second chance, I don't hate the idea of him playing better than he has so far. And if he plays better, he's going to outperform what the market's saying. So haven't bet it yet, but man, Jets plus 9.5 is looking awfully tempting on Sunday.
I can't disagree, Trig, and I'll make two comments, one about Zach Wilson, one about the Jets. One, I'm not sure why we're completely exonerating the Jets coaching staff from doing anything to make Zach Wilson marginally better. I mean, this is a team that won 8 games last year with him. That is a defense that is good enough to help carry him a little bit, and it's on the offense to scheme out a couple of wins, right? Like, it's not like Zach Wilson is untalented. He's a second overall pick in the draft. Clearly, he's got the talent to be that level of a selection in the draft. So it's on the offensive coordinator and the offensive coaches to be able to put something together that works for him a little bit better. I don't think it's fair to just say, oh, it's Zach Wilson's fault, let's throw him out. I think it's cheap and lazy. But I also look at this matchup here. If this 9.5 Trig was against, I don't know, the Niners who put up 30 last week, the Jaguars who put up 31, even to a certain extent, the Dolphins who put up 36, like, I could understand that. This Cowboys team that put up 40 last week, they didn't put up 40. They didn't earn 40. They got 3 defensive or special team scores in the game. The Cowboys did not play well offensively on Sunday night. And the Jets defense is still going to have a very viable shot to keep that offense very limited throughout the game. So I'm with you 100% that it's Jets or pass. If this thing gets to 10, I feel like it's an auto fire on the Jets for me.
Well, Mark, and also keep an eye on the Cowboys offensive line. Like, they have some injuries on that line, and they really didn't matter on Sunday night because the game was just never close, never in, the Cowboys just had that game in hand from the early going. but they will matter if they have to go in shorthanded on the offensive line and deal with this Jets front 4 or 5, which was again outstanding and probably the reason they won the game on Monday night.
Yeah. So watch the overreactions. I will admit there might be a little bit of a sigh of relief here on the Jets that, at least for all the futures bets, right? If you took them over 9.5 wins, you took them to win the AFC East, you took them to win, the Super Bowl, whatever, maybe make the AFC Championship game. Like, bookmakers probably breathed a little bit of sigh of relief with all the risk they had on the Jets coming in this offseason. All right. Let's take a look at two games each. Adam will break down one. I'll break down another. I know you're going to start in the AFC South between a game that nobody thought would be any interesting, and that's why Trig is going to break it down.
Well, Mark, I didn't really expect to come in here and give out a client play, but that's what I'm going to do because I started talking about this one on shows. It's going to make its round. So let's give the people one for free. That's the Texans, +1.5, 4% play for me. I had a great weekend in the NFL last week in 3-1. My only loss was the Texans +10 against the Ravens in a game that I think has a very deceiving final score. If you watched every snap of that game like I do, I think you would agree with me that the Texans were far better in that game than that 25-9 final would indicate. I thought the defense played outstanding for the Texans. They were all over Lamar Jackson. They had that a 7-6 game at halftime. And really, the difference in the game was just the Ravens getting in there for touchdowns and the Texans having to settle for field goals, maybe not finishing off drives. And specifically, the Ravens played a very good second half. But the Ravens are a good football team. Okay, like let's not take that away from Baltimore. And they got the job done at home. Now the Houston Texans get to go home and play what I consider to be a bad football team, the Indianapolis Colts, arguably one of the worst teams in the league, in my opinion. I thought they played a good game on Sunday, but I also thought it was a product of the Jaguars playing poorly. I thought Anthony Richardson, rookie quarterback for the Colts, played a good game, but I have to take it with a grain of salt. He was hit time after time, sacked 4 times. I just don't know that the Colts are going to be able to protect him against this Texans defense that the pass rush was really good. The pressure was really good. I think the Texans could really get back there and cause some trouble for Richardson, in this game, which will be, his first road game, right? Like that's going to be a big thing for him as well. CJ Stroud, listen, he didn't play good enough to beat the Ravens by any means. And I don't know, like the jury's still out on him 100%. I'm not even coming on here and saying I'm a Stroud guy or that I think he's going to be good, but I certainly think he could be better. And I think he may have a easier time of making plays against a Colts defense that just isn't that good. They're not going to create a lot of pressure. It's not going to be like the Ravens where Stroud's going to have to make quick decisions, get forced into turnovers, etc. He should have time to make plays against the Colts. And I think at least he could play better. And if he plays better here, that's sort of what I'm getting at with the Texans. I like this defense so much. I think the Texans could have a top 10 defense this year where if their offense just doesn't beat them, they can win games like this one where they're at home against what I consider to be an inferior Colts team. A lot of people have these two teams even. If you listen to me talk about these teams in the preseason, I said I thought the Colts were one of the worst teams in the NFL. Were going to be. I thought the Texans have an outside shot to win this division. I gave them out at 8 or 9 to 1 on the hustle over the summer. I really like this Texans team. I think the wrong team is favored here, Mark. I think the Texans end up being a 1.5 or 2-point favorite by kickoff on Sunday. And so I made the Texans a 4% play +1.5. I just think they're the right side in every way. And I think they get it done on their home field.
All right, from two of the worst in the AFC to two in the best, as the Kansas City Chiefs will travel to Jacksonville to face the Jaguars here. And again, there's a full video on the Way to Talk YouTube channel of my breakdown of this game, but I'll give it to you here real quick. A lot of this comes down to the Kansas City Chiefs, who are a 3-point favorite here, whether Travis Kelce will be healthy or not for this game. We saw what happened to the offense on Thursday Night Football. Mahomes had trouble connecting with his receivers. No wide receiver caught more than 2 passes from Patrick Mahomes in that game, including Kadarius Toney, who just decided to give the ball to the Lions for them to run in for a touchdown. Regardless, if you go back to the playoff game last year between these two teams, Kelce caught 14 passes. So Thursday night, Mahomes averaged 5.8 yards per attempt against Detroit while completing 53% of his passes with Kelce out of the lineup. For his career, and he's always had Travis Kelce on his team, he's averaged over 8 yards per attempt while completing 66% of his passes. So clearly he needs Kelce in the lineup. But this is a Jaguars team for me, Trig, that I have said for months now has been overhyped and overpriced. I'm not underestimating Trevor Lawrence's ability or anything like that, but this is a Jacksonville team last week that gave up 223 passing yards to Anthony Richardson in his NFL debut. And they actually trailed the Colts going into the fourth quarter. Don't let that 31-21 score deceive you. They were trailing going into the fourth quarter. They needed 3 turnovers to help them win the game. And not only that, this is a Jaguars offense that didn't play well against a very below average defense. They went just 3 for 12 on third down. They only averaged 3 yards a carry in the ground game, and they allowed Trevor Lawrence to be sacked 4 times. And in case you haven't been paying attention this whole week, Chris Jones signed a 1-year deal and will be back in the lineup for the Chiefs this Sunday. So if you're not going to block people, playing against Chris Jones is probably a bad recipe for success for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The real rub of this whole spot here, again, Chiefs -3, is how quickly do you want to get in here? I think that there is a risk-reward opportunity with the Chiefs at -3. If you buy in now and you take the -3, and for whatever reason Travis Kelce gets ruled out, KC's chances to cover feel like they're not very good, if not gone altogether. But on the flip side, if you hit the Chiefs -3 and Kelce does play, my guess is that this line moves closer to 3.5, if not 4. I think the news for Travis Kelce is trending in the right direction. I don't know that you'll get any clarity on Wednesday or Thursday or even Friday about whether he's playing or not. You just kind of have to hope that he gets back in the lineup sooner rather than later, and hope it's this week for a big game between these two teams. And I also think it's a huge buy low spot on Kansas City, who is much better than what they showed in week 1. They're a better team than the Jaguars, better coach and better at quarterback. Mahomes 33-9 straight up on the road in his career with a 110.4 quarterback rating. You give me 3 points or less here, I'm back in the Kansas City Chiefs, so I'm going to lay the 3.
Yeah, Mark, I just want to kind of follow up, and this will actually support your point on Kansas City, in my opinion. I made just some observations from week 1. So observation number 1, the sharpest side in the NFL, sharpest side by kickoff in terms of like sharp betting and whatnot, was the Indianapolis Colts last weekend. Okay. And I think for that, I think really what that was a play against the Jaguars. I think that the sharp bettors were playing against Jacksonville. Okay. And not only did they somehow not win, well, not only did they not win that game, but somehow they did not cover. Right. And I think if you watched that game, I think you would say, man, the Colts were a little bit unlucky right there to not at least get out with the money and cover that spread. I would not be at all surprised if they end up, if sharp money ends up showing up at some point this week on Kansas City, just for a very similar reason. And you know what? Like, the reason I think they're going to continue to fade the Jaguars is because despite having Trevor Lawrence and despite having, Ridley and like these weapons here, poor offensive line play, shoddy defense, it's probably going to plague them all season. So I can't really disagree. Listen, the Chiefs, I still think if they don't get called for that hold on the final drive, that they probably end up winning that football game against the Lions. So I can't disagree with you here. It feels like we've got overreactions both ways. And again, I just want to point out there was a very sharp play on just the Colts were very sharp, right? So you would have to think that they didn't get their money fading the Jaguars last week. They might come back and try to do it again. So I can't talk you off the Chiefs here, Mark.
Yeah, and it's not exactly like Jacksonville has this huge home field advantage either that you need to worry about. I mean, the stadium is basically empty, so it's not even a true road game. All right, as Trig and I will do every Tuesday on our Hustle Short here, we'll get you guys some survivor picks for week 2 in the NFL. And I was kind of proud of myself, Trig. I found the stinkiest survivor pick I could. I know you love digging through the trash to find games and angles that nobody else loves here. And look, this has nothing to do with my fandom, but I think the Giants are a very good survivor pick this week. I know we don't like to take road teams, but look, I bet on the Commanders last week. I watched every snap of that game against the Cardinals. The Cardinals didn't come close to scoring an offensive touchdown in the game. The only touchdown they scored was a sack fumble of Sam Howell that they ran in the end zone. They kicked 3 field goals, and that was it. Josh Dobbs is not an NFL quarterback. And I know the Giants lost 40-0, but it wasn't Daniel Jones' fault. It wasn't necessarily even the offense's or defense's fault per se. The game just got out of control quick, and it could never get back. The Giants will regroup. They're too well coached not to be better than what they were last week. And I just don't think the Cardinals really are much of an NFL team. I was kind of impressed with their defense a little bit, but still, I think the Giants are the team here this week that I would go with in Survivor.
Yeah, Mark, like you said, we're going to talk about this in this spot all season long. And listen, there's no question. The Bills are the clear, sort of obvious choice this week. They're at home against the Raiders, coming off a loss, 8.5 or 9 point favorite. So it's a very viable option. No one's going to argue with you for taking the Bills. But this is about winning Survivor, right? And typically, you're never going to win this competition if you're just going to take the easiest sort of thing every week, because you're going to do what everyone else is, and the point is to not go out when everyone else goes out. That's kind of the point of Survivor. So I cannot at all disagree with you. I think that this would be a very, viable sort of spot to use the Giants. I think that they can't be worse. They can't be worse than they showed last week. And I totally agree with you. I think the Cardinals are I know we talked about the Colts earlier being one of the worst football teams in the league. I think the Cardinals are the worst football team in the league. And I also am surprised at how close that game ended up being against the Commanders. I would almost attribute it more to the Commanders' sort of shoddy play than I would the Cardinals being any good. With that being said, I think another very viable option for Survivor this week is the Broncos. The Broncos come off a loss. I thought they played really poorly. I was actually surprised at just how sort of, we joked about the Broncos coaching all year last year and figured Peyton would come in and clean it up. But I thought that there were, some questionable sort of spots in that game, and maybe that they lost the game in a game they really probably could have won. So I'd be willing to sort of bet on them cleaning that up a little bit this week. And of course, you'd be going against the Commanders, which we just talked about. Their poor play, probably the reason for that close score against the Cardinals. And now they have to go out on the road to Mile High. I think that's probably a good fade of the Commanders. So looking at Survivor on Tuesday, obviously things could change, injury issues, what have you. I can't disagree with you on the Giants. And the other two I would throw in there would be the Broncos and the Bills being the obvious one if I'm looking at the early look at Survivor Week 2.
Trig, I'll give you one more, and it's equally as trashy, if not even trashier. But are the Buccaneers good enough to pick in this spot against the Bears? I mean, they're home. I know they had a big road win last week, but when are you really going to get another opportunity to play the Buccaneers other than when they're hosting a bad Chicago Bears defense?
Man, that is that's one you'd have to, have some stones to bet that one, of course. But here's the thing, like, unfortunately, it's funny that we're gonna frame it like this, but unfortunately the Bucks won, right? So the Bucks come
Right.
off of this big road upset. It's part of the reason I was talking at the open of the show that it's tough to bet the Jets this week, even though it looks like a good number and a good spot, because they kind of have this big high profile win. Now they have to come home. Now they're the favorite. Of course, the Bears come off a loss. But I'll say this week what I said last week on all these Wager Talk shows when we talked about Bears Packers. The Bears have some real issues on both sides of the ball. They were totally exposed by the Packers, right? Like, they have issues on the offensive line, and their defense is just not that good. I know they on paper they improved it in the offseason, but this is still a bad defense. So are they going to go on the road and beat Tampa Bay? I mean, the one thing that the Packers really had going for them was the offensive line just abused Chicago's defensive front. Jordan Love, I mean, Packers did whatever they wanted. Jordan Love, easy throw after easy throw. Will the Bucks be able to protect like that? We'll see. But I mean, it's just that it's not the ideal spot for the Bucks from a betting perspective. Now, to go back to your point, might be a rare opportunity to use them, but the goal is still to survive here, Mark. You know what I mean? We still want to survive. I don't think I could take the Bucks over, let's say, a team like the Giants or a team like the Broncos, who just they profile in such a better spot to get a win.
All right, that'll do it for this Hustle Short here. Make sure you guys check out the Hustle Show podcast in its entirety every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at TopFlightSI. That's where Adam Trigger is. I'm at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno for Adam and our entire crew here. Appreciate you guys watching this Hustle Short. And again, full show Thursday night. We'll talk tomorrow.